Welcome to The Explainer. Right off the bat, we're going to set the stage for a story that honestly completely reevaluates football history. Today, we're unpacking the forgotten genius of a guy who literally changed the way the game is played. Football history has this habit of celebrating the people who popularize tactical innovations rather than the pioneers who actually invent them in the first place. So today, we're looking at the true, unsung architect of the modern midfield, the one and only Bobby Murdoch. Okay, let's dive into this. If you go up to most football historians and ask them who invented the all-action, complete midfield role, they're almost always going to point to the 1970s. They'll talk about the Dutch total football revolution, and specifically, they're going to name Johan Neeskens. And hey, Neeskens was brilliant, absolutely no doubt about it. But what if I told you that years before the Dutch Revolution swept across Europe, the exact blueprint for the modern box-to-box midfielder was already being perfected by a working-class sheet metal worker from Scotland?
All right, Section 1, Birth of a Pioneer.
Let's look at Bobby Murdoch's rise. He was just an ordinary Scottish boy from the really tough streets of Lanarkshire, signing for Celtic back in 1959 as a £3-a-week part-timer. But here's the thing, his early career was actually totally stalling out. He was playing as an inside forward and, frankly, he was failing at it. The crowd was constantly on his back, and by 1964, he was seriously considering just packing it all up and emigrating to Australia to leave football behind entirely. But then, Jock Stein arrives as Celtic's manager in '65, and he pulls off an absolute masterstroke. Stein saw something that literally everyone else had missed. He realized Murdoch wasn't a forward at all, he was a controller. So Stein pulls him back into the right half position, and suddenly Murdoch transforms into this fluid, all-action engine. I mean, he's dropping deep to collect the ball, he's aggressively pressing to win it right back, and he's orchestrating attacks. He completely shattered those rigid, specialized molds of 1960s football where you had to be either a pure defender or a pure attacker. Murdoch was suddenly doing the whole shebang. Moving right along to Section 2, conquering Europe in 1967. This tactical transformation completely set the stage for Celtic conquering Europe. And look, the 1967 European Cup final wasn't just a match. It was basically a legendary battle for the very soul of football. On one side, you've got Jock Stein's incredibly attacking Celtic side. On the other side, the massive favorites, Inter Milan, who utilized a highly defensive, deeply cynical tactical system that had made them serial winners. To really get this, we have to understand exactly what Celtic was up against. Inter Milan played catenaccio. This system was all about heavy defense, sitting incredibly deep and using tight man marking to just completely choke the life out of the opposition's attack. Inter used this to stifle teams all across Europe. Breaking them down, especially if they managed to take an early lead, was considered pretty much impossible. Well, the impossible is exactly what Celtic ran into. In the 7th minute, Inter scores an early penalty. Absolute disaster. Inter immediately retreats right back into their catenaccio shell. But instead of panicking, Bobby Murdoch just grabs the game by the scruff of the neck. He took total control. He dictated the rhythm, his passing slicing right through Inter's rigid structure. Finally, in the 63rd minute, Tommy Jummel blasts in the equalizer. And then we get the triumphant climax in the 84th minute. Murdoch fires a shot from distance, Stevie Chalmers gets the touch on it, and Celtic actually wins it 2-1. And just like that, they became immortalized as the Lisbon Lions. I mean, this was a monumental achievement, the first British club to ever win football's ultimate prize. And get this, they did it with a squad of homegrown players, every single one of them born within a 30-mile radius of Glasgow. They defeated the undisputed masters of defense playing pure, unadulterated attacking football. Which brings us to Section 3, Building the Legend. In the aftermath of that final, the fans naturally celebrated the guys who scored the goals. But behind the scenes, the true tactical giants of the era knew exactly who was actually running the show. They knew who the real architect of that victory was. Just listen to this staggering praise. Bobby Murdoch is my complete footballer. And that isn't coming from some diehard Celtic fan. That is from Helenio Herrera, the mastermind manager of that defeated Inter Milan side. The guy who practically perfected the greatest defensive system in the world looked at the pitch and singled out Bobby Murdoch as the ultimate complete player. And this brilliantly illustrates the exact same feeling going around inside his own dressing room. His teammate Jim Craig put it perfectly, saying, "When Murdoch plays, Celtic play." His teammates fully recognized that their entire high-octane attacking machine completely dependent on Murdoch setting the tempo. He was the press-resistant connector they completely relied on whenever things got chaotic on the pitch. Okay, Section 4, Murdoch versus Neeskens.
let's see how all this builds into our broader historical understanding. We really have to do a direct comparison here to prove that Murdoch was executing this complete midfield role years before the world credited Johan Neeskens for it. When we line up their traits side by side, it's wild. These two players were practically identical in their tactical awareness and elite output. Excellent defensive work, outstanding passing, elite work rate across the board. Both were completely tireless. Both could crunch into a tackle, and both could beautifully orchestrate a game. They were essentially the exact same profile of player, just separated by an era and, let's be honest, a completely different level of international PR.
Let's break down exactly how Murdoch functioned out there. First off, he offered constant passing availability. He was the ultimate outball for his teammates, and he used defensive intelligence to read passing lanes perfectly, kind of like a chess master, rather than just relying on sheer brute force. His distribution was always progressive. He was always looking to transition from defense to attack in the blink of an eye. Toss in his tireless box-to-box running, and the way he initiated aggressive pressing the split second the ball was lost. These are all the absolute hallmarks of the modern game, and he was pioneering them back in the 1960s.
So, with all this undeniable genius, you'd think he'd have a massive international career, right? How many times did he represent his country? 12. A shocking, honestly derisory 12 caps for Scotland. It just perfectly highlights how vastly unappreciated his tactical genius was outside the walls of Celtic Park. To the wider world, he was just a good player, but to those who really understood tactics, the guy was a revolutionary. But, well, as with so many sports legends, the fairy tale of the Lisbon Lions didn't last forever. The cheering eventually stopped, and the story takes a much darker, incredibly painful turn once the stadium floodlights finally turned off. Section 5. The Tragic Aftermath. It's a heartbreaking reality to contrast here. You have a man who had absolute, total control of a football match on the field, compared with a man who experienced a complete loss of control in his personal life once his playing days ended. The sequence of his decline is just awful. First, he suffered from severe, unhealed ankle injuries that literally left this once immortal athlete relying on walking sticks just to get around. Then, a pub business he'd invested in completely collapsed, which led to severe debt and bankruptcy. And finally, just trying to cope with the physical pain and the financial ruin, he fell into a really tragic spiral of alcohol dependency. He became a broken man, hidden behind the glory of a footballing immortal. It's incredibly cruel how football simply moves on, isn't it? The game that once so desperately needed Bobby Murdoch didn't even look his way once the glory faded. He was left to suffer in the shadows, away from the spotlight, largely without the support network he so desperately needed at the time. Let's bring it home. Section 6. An Immortal Legacy. It is absolutely vital that we remember the complete picture of Bobby Murdoch. We have to honor the quiet genius who dictated the beautiful game, while also acknowledging the vulnerable human being who struggled so much when the game was over. Because his undeniable achievements, they really do speak for themselves. We're talking over 400 appearances for Celtic, more than 100 goals from midfield, which, by the way, is an insane number for his position, a European champion, 8 Scottish League titles, 5 Scottish Cups, 5 League Cups. These aren't just statistics on a page. They are undeniable proof that he was the true heartbeat of one of Europe's greatest ever club sides.
Which brings us to our final question for today. Will football history finally recognize Bobby Murdoch as the true architect of the modern midfield? Honestly, the next time you watch one of those fluid, pressing, all-action midfielders dominating the game today, don't just think of the 1970s. You should think of the working-class boy from Lanarkshire who did it first. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, keep looking past the accepted narratives, and I'll catch you next time.